You can check it out on YouTube for the visuals, and then you can listen in anywhere you listen to podcasts at. So definitely that dropped today. So definitely after this live, make sure y'all tune into that podcast. And it's all about entrepreneurship. So if you're trying to get into life or you already about that life, definitely check it out because he drops some gems. Hey, Dr. Chanda.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well, doing well. How's your year starting off?
Oh, it's good. It's day 10. So
Yes.
day 10, and it's been productive and it's been consistent.
Yes.
So I'm like, it feels fresh and it feels new and exciting. So I'm hopefully by next month it will still have the same energy.
I love that. I love that. It's always the best when our year starts off great. Even though there might be like highs and lows, like, it's all about that consistency. So I'm here for it.
Absolutely. I love the glasses. We're kind of twinning.
A little bit.
With the turtle shell.
Yes, yes. I was contemplating if I wanted to wear them because of the glare, but since you complimented me, I'm going to keep them on.
Go ahead. See, I have to, because if I take them off, I won't be able to see nobody. But they look good.
Thank you, girl.
Look good. We're so happy and so thrilled to have you here. So for everybody tuning in, this is Dr. Chanda Reynolds, and she is an amazing clinical psychologist. And so we wanted to really just launch our Wellness Wednesday program with no one other than Dr. Chanda. And so we're just so thrilled to have you here. Again, Wellness Wednesday is really an informative program where, we want to hear from you all. We want to get your questions. We want to kind of spill like the tea. We want to be able to give you the gems. Just as it relates to overall wellness, lifestyle management, stress management, because although we feel really great in the hyped up energy of the new year, better us or better me, we want to keep that momentum going. And we understand like everyone is on their own journey and path. So while others may feel very energetic and excited about the new year, we understand that others could very much still be in the grief journey, in the stress journey, like just kind of like in the ebbs and flows of wellness and life. So awesome. Well, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Chanda. We have a few questions, and then if y'all have some questions for Dr. Chanda, again, this is really just for educational purposes. She could definitely give y'all some insights or resources if you guys are looking for therapy or looking for any resources or supports. But we always want to make sure that if you guys are in a crisis or that you need some additional professional support, that you seek that from professionals outside of this IG Live. We can definitely offer you resources such as 988, such as the crisis text line. So definitely we'll make sure to get you all those resources as we move along. All right, Dr. Chanda, take it over.
Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all for having me. I am excited to get into your mental health questions. So for those of you who are just now joining in, feel free to either comment your questions or you can put them inside of our the question little bubble that's on the side there. So make sure that you're asking as many questions as you like. I saw Auntie Shanti enter the building. So I want y'all to write in the chat, hey, Auntie Shanti, thank you so much for providing us this platform in order to be able to talk about mental health and wellness, y'all. So it's so important for us to be able to talk about this, especially at the beginning of the year. A lot of people say like, new year, new me. But, just to kind of keep it 100 with y'all, like it's going to be the same you as 2023 if you don't implement strategies and practical tools in order to change your life. So I want y'all to, again, ask as many questions as you'd like. We do have some questions that were already sent in. That's right. Light it up. Hey, Auntie Shanti, light it up. So we're going to go ahead into them. Awesome, awesome. All right. So the first question we have, do you want me to read them or were there additional ones? Okay, perfect. The first question that you guys sent in, what are some common signs and symptoms of mental health issues that I should be aware of? So what are some common signs and symptoms of mental health that I should be aware of? So for individuals who are experiencing mental health concerns, right? So let's define that. Basically, we're talking about experiencing emotional difficulty to the point where you can no longer cope with that thing, right? So, how do I know when I'm experiencing these types of signs and symptoms? Well, first, I always encourage my clients to look for things that might be going outside of their norm, right? So, what's outside of my normal way of functioning? So, what does that look like? In this time of my life, am I getting more sleep? Am I requiring more sleep? Am I requiring less sleep? Am I eating more or am I eating less, right? Libido, is my libido less than it typically is? Like paying attention to sex drive and things of that nature is important because again, it all is connected with our mental health. Paying attention to what you're eating. So if you're craving particular types of things, such as things that are like salty, things that are processed, things that are high in sugar, then that can be indicative of stress increasing, right? So if an individual is, their sleep is impacted, their eating is impacted, libido is impacted, all of these are telltale signs that something is going on and that we need to further dive into that. We need to further look into that. In addition to that, one of the common things that we saw is in mental health symptoms is individuals who might feel the need to withdraw, right? So if this is a time, a period in your life where you feel as though I'm withdrawing, I'm not as social right now, I am not engaging with other people as I typically am, as I normally am, I don't feel like answering the phone for people, I don't feel like going out to see my friends or what have you, then it's starting to it's time to ask yourself those hard questions. It's time to ask yourself those hard questions. I see y'all comments about my glasses. Thank y'all. I appreciate you. The hard questions about whether or not something is happening, something out of the norm pertaining to your emotions. In addition, if an individual is experiencing thoughts related to suicide, right? So thoughts related to harming yourself, thoughts related to we call passive suicide, but basically like I just wish I can go to sleep and not wake up. I wish everything could just go away. I wish I could just not be here. Life will be better off without me, right? So those passive statements, right, is indicative that something is happening, something is going wrong. So it's really important to be mindful of these types of things. So, Silence the Shame just commented. So, if you guys have any questions about mental health, managing stress, managing lifestyle, or anything about your overall health and wellness, please put your questions in the chat. So, that's for Instagram and wherever else you're watching this. Make sure that you guys are putting your questions inside of the chat so that we are answering them. And again, you guys can ask away in the comment section or in that question section as well. So, specifically as it relates to stress management. So, another question that we recently had is, can you provide me with some stress management techniques that I can incorporate into my daily life? I love, love, love this question. Why? Because we all experience stress. We all experience some level of stress, whether we acknowledge it or not. Right? We experience stress when we drive in traffic. We experience stress when we go to the grocery store and it's longer than we wanted to, right? Those are minor experiences of stress, but it happens every single day. So it's important for us to be able to manage it, right? So one of the ways that we can incorporate stress management strategies into our daily lives is by simply first knowing how to acknowledge when it's happening. So if you're mindful of how to acknowledge stress happening in your body, you're more likely to catch it before it turns into an issue. For instance, if I know that when I'm stressed out, I know that my eating changes. I know that I become more short with people or I'm more irritable with people. I know that I don't want to necessarily, work out or do the things that I typically do. Like that's indicative that stress is occurring in my body. Even physical symptoms of stress, right? So if we're physically talking about stress related things, if we're physically talking about ways that stress shows up in the body. So is your heart racing more often? Do you find that your breathing isn't more intense, right? So again, are your hands trembling or shaking, right? So these are ways that we can assess how we can handle or different ways we can assess stress. And so when it comes to actually managing that stress, one of the main ways that I teach my clients to manage stress, whether they're at home, they're at school, they're at work or whatever, is by simply practicing deep breathing. I know it sounds cliche. Y'all probably like, well, they tell us to do that all the time, but there's a reason for that, right? So, one of the reasons why I encourage my clients to do this is because you might be in a space and time in your life or a place where you might not have access to other stress management strategies, but we all have access to breath right now, right? So even if you kind of like sit back in your chair wherever you're watching this live and to just practice deep breathing for a few seconds, then you'll notice that the different symptoms in your body might start to reduce. The different stress related symptoms in your body might start to reduce. So simply deep breathing can be really helpful. Being mindful of how you're breathing is also really important, y'all. So I always tell my clients, if you just like breathing in and breathing out, that ain't going to do nothing. Right. So if you're actually being intentional and purposeful about your breaths, so breathing in for 7 seconds, holding it for 7 seconds, and breathing out for 7 seconds, that is how we activate the body's what we call the parasympathetic nervous system. And so that essentially is when you think of like the parachute, right? A parachute helps you to go down. The parasympathetic nervous system helps things to kind of go down in your body, and it helps to reduce and relieve that stress. So I see your comments. So on TikTok, they're saying deep breathing has helped me so much. They're also saying hi, Auntie Shanti on TikTok as well. What else? I saw some comments on here. Someone commented, if you've been around people who always give you negative comments and they come down on you, whether it is family, friends, or other people at work, and get negative thoughts. Okay, so I'm assuming this question is about negative thoughts related to comments that people make about you. That's a really great question, right? Because it's something that we all experience. We all are going to experience times where people might not have the kindest things that we say about us, about ourselves, about situations that we might have engaged in or whatever, right? So this happens. It's a part of life, but it's important not to internalize every negative thing that comes your way. And one of my favorite podcasts I was listening to this morning, the Black Girl Bravado, shout out to them. They were talking about not personalizing everything. We're always going to experience negative things in life and negative comments in life, but it doesn't mean we have to internalize it. And a lot of times, if we really kind of think back on the reason why we're internalizing, it's because we're allowing other people's projections to be accepted by us. We're accepting other people's projections that they have on us, right? So when we talk about projections, we're talking about people who internalize things about themselves, but then they put it off on other people. That's not my bag to carry, beloved. Like, so it's really important when we're talking about, and it's, constructive criticism is great, but if we're talking about people who constantly have negative things to say about you and we're internalizing that, that's a problem, and we really need to check it. So I love that question. Keep the questions coming. Another question that I have is, I used to be diagnosed with I have been diagnosed with ADHD. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was a question, but they're acknowledging that they were diagnosed with ADHD. I love the fact that more people are beginning to understand. More people are beginning to understand the fact that ADHD has been around for a minute. However, we have more tools, we have more strategies to be able to identify it. And so if a question is, how do I know if I have ADHD or not? One of the reasons that a lot of people have been underdiagnosed is because people haven't been assessed in the ways in which that they needed to. So going to a psychiatrist, a psychologist in order to be assessed, that's one way to be able to identify whether or not an individual has ADHD. I'm not going to read that question out loud, but I brush my teeth. That's why praise God. Do you usually medicate people with ADHD or give them other therapies? So an individual who is diagnosed with ADHD, there are multiple ways that we treat that, right? Medication doesn't necessarily have to be applied with all forms of ADHD because there are different types. There are types of the combined type, we have the inattentive type, we have the type where you're simply just hyperactive. So we have the hyperactive, we have the inattentive, and we have combined, where both of those are together. It depends on the severity of symptoms though, right? So one of the best lines of treatment for ADHD is like a CBT, organizational executive functioning type of therapy. But if the symptoms are so debilitating to the point where the person can't necessarily gain what they need to in therapy, then it's important it might be helpful to go that medication route. But whenever I have a client, whether they're a child or an adult, I usually encourage parents like to see how likely it is that we can kind of treat these things on by themselves without necessarily going the medication route yet, especially with children. Can you elaborate more on how to combat internalization and the other side effects that may come with lifestyle changes, such as replacing unhealthy habits? That's a great question. That's a great question. So, how to combat the internalization or other side effects that might come with lifestyle changes. So, when it comes to changing things in our lives overall, right, there's going to be some level of a dissonance, because we were doing something one way for a minute, right? It became a part of our norm, a normalized way of doing things. However, when we start to change that up, it can create some level of internal conflict, because again, it's out of our norm. And so one of the ways that we try to combat these internalized thoughts is to first identify where the thoughts are coming from, what's driving it. Are these fear-based responses? Are these fear-based thoughts? Are they rooted in the fear of failure? Are they rooted in self-esteem difficulty, right? And also identifying the type of thoughts. One thing that I always encourage my clients on is to identify the negative style of thinking that they're tending to use. We call them cognitive distortions or stinking thinking, basically. And so what this means is we all have negative ways of thinking, right? I don't care. You could be the most positive person in life. We're all going to have sometimes negative ways of thinking about ourselves, other people, in the world. Not saying it has to be the particular style that you use all the time, but sometimes we tend to jump to conclusions. We tend to think in a very black and white way, or what we call dichotomous thinking. It's either all good or it's all bad. Other times we tend to utilize what we call the negative filter, right? So all of these are different examples of negative ways or distorted ways of thinking about ourselves and other people. So it's really important to identify the different cognitive distortions that we're tending to use. And I have a whole list of cognitive distortions. I can send them to Auntie Shanti, and she can distribute that to, like, whoever has access to the email list. If y'all not signed up to the Silence the Shame newsletter, y'all need to sign up like today, because they send out stuff every month. I get my emails, Auntie, and I read them, and they're always well thought out and well done. So and they send out resources there as well. So I love that. So you guys can keep commenting the questions. If I missed any, just feel free to put them in the chat again, because y'all got this chat moving. All right. Okay, so I'm going to go back to some of the previously sent in questions that we had. And again, if you haven't shared this live, I need you guys to share it with as many people as possible. Why? Because like I said, it's not going to be a new year, new you if you're doing the same old things. It's going to be the same you, beloved. So I need you to share this with as many people as possible, so we can get y'all some new strategies and new tools on how to change in order to live an overall better life and fulfilling life. So continue to leave your questions. Going back to some of these other questions, what are some effective, I think I read that one. How can I stay motivated to continue practicing self-care regularly? I love this question. How can I stay motivated to practice self-care regularly? So when we think about self-care, there has been this movement over the past few years that has really pushed the notion that we have to spend money in order to take care of ourselves. We have to spend money. We have to go to the nail salon. We have to get a facial. We got to get a pedicure. We got to do X, Y, or Z. We got to go to brunch. We got to do all these things because it's self-care Sunday, self-care Saturday, but not necessarily, right? Because of this way that we have like glamorized self-care, we tend to miss that it can be something so simple that allows us to just take a step back from whatever it is that's causing us stress and to recover and recoup. I don't have to necessarily go to the nail salon in order for me to experience a moment of peace. I don't necessarily have to go get a pedicure in order for me to practice self-care regularly, right? So when we think about self-care, this is basically, again, like a tool, a strategy, a resource that we utilize in order to allow us to recover, right? Allowing you to recover. That is self-care. So what's one thing that allows you to recover? You guys can put it in the chat, or you can put it wherever else, but tell me one thing that allows you to rest and recover. For me, Going to church allows me to recover. It allows me to recover spiritually. Allows me to recover from a communal aspect, right? So that is self-care in my from my perspective. And no, it doesn't necessarily have to, again, like, you're not spending money. You're literally going into a community setting. Another way that I like to engage in self-care is by taking soft moments to just simple moments just to reflect, right? And so one thing that we do in therapy, I teach my clients micro self-care, right? So it means that I don't necessarily have to take a full day to myself in order to be considered self-care, right? So micro self-care can be, okay, at 12:15, or what time is it? At 1:15, I'm going to give myself 15 minutes to go to the coffee shop down the street and to sit for a while and to just relax and read a book. That literally is self-care. It doesn't have to be long. It doesn't necessarily have to be a lot of money. So allowing yourself micro moments of time throughout the day can help to ensure that you are engaging in that regularly. Because again, if we're putting a lot of stress on ourselves, saying, it's got to be a full day of self-care, I got to spend X amount of money, I got to do X, Y, and Z, I wouldn't keep up with that schedule either. So again, we can engage in it regularly if we're allowing it to be achievable. Like, listen, going to the nail salon every week or however, like, that's not achievable, especially with the price of full sets now, honey. Like, no. So we got to find different ways of engaging in self-care. Somebody said church, taking showers, body care, layering body butter. All of these are methods of self-care. I love this. Somebody else said talking to a friend. I sent the invitation by accident. My bad. Talking to a friend can be self care. What are y'all saying on Instagram? Go ahead and comment y'all's ways of self care. Awesome. So we're going to go ahead and move on to another question. There was another question you guys sent. Oh, here it is. Okay. How can I differentiate between regular stress and mental burnout? And I keep saying I love all these questions, but I really do, because it's like, these are questions that people really want to know. And these are very common questions. But how do I differentiate between regular stress and burnout? Okay, so somebody had recently asked me this on a panel that I was on, and oftentimes we tend to conflate the two because they're so similar, right? They're very similar in the way that they show up. When we think about stress, when we think about anxiety, we have to keep in mind that, like, they're natural. We can't go throughout life anxiety free and stress free, because some levels of stress and anxiety can be helpful. If I didn't have stress and anxiety about my schedule, or getting this proposal in on time, or what have you, I would miss deadlines all the time, right? But we know that it's going into dangerous territory when it's starting to impact me from a physiological level. It's starting to impact me from a cognitive level. It's impacting me behaviorally, right? So, like, all of these ways of stress and anxiety can show up, but if it's impacting me in my daily functioning, and it's causing me to, going back to what we said earlier, causing me to sleep more or sleep less, or eat more, eat less, or whatever, that's how we know it's going into that negative territory. But what is the difference between that and burnout? So when we're talking about mental health burnout, we're typically relating it to like work related burnout, and feeling overexhausted by the things that we have going on, whether it's career related or academic related or even family related. We can be burned out by family related duties and things of that nature. But when it comes to burnout, we can recognize it when it's when we're feeling burnt out, even at the thought of the activity, right? When we feel as though we no longer have that passion for that thing anymore. When every time we think about it, it's difficult for us to actually engage with it and to get work done, right? So when we stress tends to be a bit more general, whereas burnout is a bit more specific, related to that thing that is causing the burnout. And so when we're feeling burnt out, when we're feeling like our performance isn't where it typically is, whether it's related to academic work, if it's related to work related, career related work, family, relationally related stuff, like, if you feel like you're not performing in the same way that you typically do, if your work ethic isn't to where it typically is, if your grades aren't getting where they usually are, and again, you're feeling exhausted by these things, that's typically how you kind of differentiate the two. And if it sounds like they're very similar, it's because they are, right? It's because they typically are. But I always tell people, If you're questioning whether or not you're burnt out, it's a strong likelihood that you probably already are, right? Sometimes we just need to kind of give ourselves the permission to label it what it is. And burnout is definitely one of those things. All right.
Dr. Chanda?
Yes.
Yeah, so we have a question about family dynamics in the comments in Instagram. So somebody asked, how do you deal with a parent that doesn't respect your boundaries? And when stated, they become the victim, then you have to validate them.
That's such a great question. That's such a great question. Okay, so let's get into it. So when we talk about boundary setting in general, we of course we know, we see it on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever. Like, it's important to set boundaries. It's important to set boundaries for yourself. It's not for the other person, it's for you, or whatever. But it's a whole different ball game when we're talking about setting boundaries with parents, right? And when we're adding that nuance in about like being from a Black household or a Hispanic household or what have you, where where setting a boundary might be deemed as disrespectful, then it's important to recognize like that adds a different layer, right? It can feel a lot more debilitating to do that. And so when we talk about boundary setting with difficult family members, it's really important for us to identify what our needs are, to identify what we are asking, and then to let them know, like, if this is not something that you feel like we can do, or somewhere you feel like you can meet me at, then this is how it's going to change our relationship. Whether that means to talking on the phone less. I know that, talking on the phone typically leads to us arguing. So I have to set that boundary with you. I know that going to your house, we end up, butting heads. So that means I have to set that boundary with you. And again, letting them know this isn't anything related to disrespect. I still respect you. I still see you as my mother. I still see you as my father. But also, I have these emotions that I have to protect. Yeah, but that was a great question. I love that. Are there any others that I didn't see in the chat?
Yeah, there's one other from earlier. How can you stay disciplined with new goals?
Great question. That's a great question for the new year. How do you stay disciplined with new goals? So firstly, I always write down my goals, and I try my best to assess them in a way to where they are achievable and attainable. Oftentimes when we're goal setting, especially for the new year, we start off with this like laundry list of things that we want to get done, and we don't necessarily have anything broken down to where it's achievable. We don't have anything broken down to kind of like smaller steps, right? And so if we're writing down this exhaustive list of goals, we're writing down this exhaustive list of intentions for the year, and we're not meeting them, that's just going to result in us feeling bad about ourselves, or feeling like a failure, feeling like I let myself down once again for the new year. It's only February 1st and I already missed the gym for a whole week. What's going on, right? We always go through these things. But when we try to break them down, so again, that they're achievable and attainable, then that helps us to be more consistent with the things that we are trying to do. So going back to the gym example, if I know that I have a goal of wanting to be consistent in the gym, then I'm going to say, okay, minimum, I'm going to do 20 minutes a day in the gym. Or even if you can do 15 minutes a day, all depending on what your schedule is, then again, making sure that it coincides with what you can do in order to make sure it's attainable at this time and where you are in your life. That was such a great question. And somebody said, get prepared for the gym the night before too. Yes, smaller goals. I love this. I love this. Awesome. Any other ones that I missed?
There's one that just came in. How can a parent with high anxiety support a college student with high
Okay.
anxiety?
Well, first things first, it's important to have your own therapist as a parent, right? So oftentimes when we have children who are, going off to college or what have you, it can feel very anxiety provoking because we don't have that same level. It feels like we don't have that same level of protection of them. Like we can't protect them where they are if they're going away, right? However, it's important to trust like the things that you instilled in them, like the values that you instilled in them, and also again, like going back to managing our own anxiety. right? So going to therapy, going to see a professional psychologist or social worker or whoever who can help you with some of the thoughts that you're thinking and some of the symptoms that you're having about your child going to school. What type of fear is this related in? Is there a fear of safety, a fear of failure, a fear that they won't, that you won't be able to meet all of their needs? Like all of these things can be addressed in a professional type of setting. And also, there are college campuses with therapists like all over. And if your child doesn't have one, there are, let me see. There are quite a few organizations that offer therapy for college students. So I will look into that as well, just so that your child is able to manage the anxiety. But yeah, so like it's important to recognize that anxiety comes with this stage in life, but it's important to be able to rely on professional resources to help you out with it. Y'all are amazing. Awesome. Let me see if I have any others. Somebody says SMART goals. I love that. Did I miss any other questions?
Let me double check, and just so everybody viewing, wherever y'all viewing from, we are going to start wrapping it up. So if y'all do have any questions, we'll try to get Dr. Chanda to answer them. But if not, this is a monthly program, y'all. So Wellness Wednesday happens every second Wednesday of the month. We will be back next month in February. And so definitely making sure that you put your little reminder in wherever you want to, calendar, IG, wherever. Tune in, make sure you're plugging in and signing up for the Silence of Shame newsletter and following us on Instagram, Facebook, anywhere to just stay connected to us. So
y'all do such a great job with that newsletter.
Awesome. Thank you so much, yes. Dr. Chanda. So y'all heard it from listen, y'all heard it from her yourself. Like, go check out the newsletter. It's just a way to stay connected with Silence of Shame, but also receiving more educational resources to just have a better understanding of mental health, wellness, lifestyle management, just everything to do with your overall health and wellness. We have to remember that the brain is a part of our entire body, so we have to take care of it and nourish it just like we do the rest of us.
Exactly.
Let's see. I think we could finish off with it. I just have this one last question. So how can a person who deals with anxiety and depression and still be able to effectively support family as well as practice self-care? And I think you touched on all of that a little bit just throughout the answers. Mm-hmm. So we could probably just wrap it up in a nice little bow.
Yeah, that was a great final question because it does kind of touch on everything that we talked about. But one, recognizing like the symptoms that you have, and when you can continue to like care for other people, because when we're pouring from an empty cup or a cup that needs replenishing ourselves, then that's going to lead us to that burnout, which can then potentially lead us to just having a negative outlook on the overall duties that you do have in your family. And so we don't want that to happen. So it's important to be aware of that. And also, again, like, finding somebody or a supportive group who can help you with processing whatever it is that you're processing, whether that is like a individual therapist or like a community-based group, a group of girlfriends you can go out with like every now and then. Like having that community in spaces like this is important.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, Dr. Chanda. Everybody go ahead and hit the little heart button and just do a kudos and shout out to Dr. Chanda and just her wonderful taking the time to just really be able to answer your questions, enlighten y'all, drop those gems, and hopefully y'all are able to take so much more from this IG Live. Again, this is a monthly program, so every second Wednesday of the month, definitely tune in, Silence of Shame IG Live for Wellness Wednesdays. We will be working with various clinical psychologists, and obviously we can't wait to have Dr. Chanda come back on. Again, today we did drop a new podcast.